Welcome. This is your Need to Know. This is an episode recap, so there will be spoilers, sweetie. Music by Sisters AI Rhythmic. Check them out on YouTube.
This is your Need to Know.
Spoiler, sweetie.
This is your Need to Know.
Welcome back, everybody. You know, for sci-fi and fantasy fans like us, it's been, well, a bit of a bloodbath this season. I mean, so many shows are either ending or they're just getting straight up canceled.
Yeah.
And we're talking about like a serious chunk of them, too.
Right.
Like canceled sci-fi, the blog, they keep track of all this. You know,
Yeah.
out of 36 shows, they're tracking 11 that have either bit the dust or they're, riding off into the sunset.
Right, yeah.
So it's almost the third.
It's a lot to keep track of, that's for sure. But, when we look back, this number is pretty much on par with what we've seen over the last few years.
Yeah. So maybe it's not like some crazy, unprecedented thing, but it definitely feels like a gut punch when it's your favorite show on the chopping block.
Oh, absolutely. It hurts every time.
And what's really interesting this season is like, it's not just cancellations,
Right.
It's this mix of like planned endings and then just the totally out of the blue acts. Canceled sci-fi actually keeps this running scorecard, like cancellations versus renewals.
Oh, okay.
Right now it's sitting at 11 to 14. So on the surface, you're like, oh, okay, it's pretty balanced, but
But there's always a but.
there's always a but, right? I mean, we're only halfway through the season. If this keeps up,
2025 is going to be a massacre.
buckle up, everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we totally spiral into sci-fi despair here,
Yeah.
let's unpack this whole like ending versus canceled thing.
Yeah, good point.
Because take Andor on Disney Plus Arcane on Netflix, both ending after 2 seasons.
Right.
But that's where things get a little fuzzy.
Yeah, and this is where we got to talk about limited series, right? Both those shows, and/or Arcane, they were designed to be kind of self-contained stories told within a specific number of episodes.
So it's not a traditional cancellation. It's more like the creators had a story to tell. They told it.
Yep, beginning, middle, end.
The end.
And, this whole limited series thing, it's gaining a ton of momentum in streaming. You get a complete story, no need to commit to 5 seasons.
Yeah, it makes total sense. Like, I'm busy. I don't always have time for a super long, drawn-out thing. Sometimes you just want, a nice contained story.
Yeah, it's perfect for that.
It's like a gourmet cupcake versus, a 5-tier wedding cake that might go stale before you finish it.
Exactly.
But I know some of us out there, they crave those epic multi-season sagas. And there's still hope for you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Because, take The Dragon Prince on Netflix.
Oh, yeah, good one.
They're actually getting a full 7 seasons to wrap up their story. That is practically unheard of, especially on Netflix.
The Dragon Prince is a total outlier in the best way possible. It shows that long-form storytelling can still have a place in the streaming world.
Right, and it's got serious pedigree, too.
Yeah.
It's from the same people who created Avatar. The Last Airbender, another show with a massively dedicated fan base and known for that, epic storytelling. Right?
Exactly. So it's like a proven formula for success.
Speaking of fan bases, Star Trek.
Yeah.
Lower Decks. This one's interesting. It's ending after 5 seasons on Paramount Plus Barrel, which for a streaming show is pretty good.
Yeah, that's a respectable run.
But some fans are hoping it might, find a new home, maybe get picked up by another platform.
Yeah, and that raises a really interesting question. Could platform hopping become more common? I mean, we see these streaming services constantly battling it out for content, so it wouldn't surprise me if more shows start jumping ship.
Like musical chairs, but with TV shows.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so we talked about those shows with planned endings. But now let's get to the real heartbreakers, the ones that got cut down way before their time.
The ones that left us hanging.
Yeah, and one that really stings is Chaos on Netflix. I mean, fantasy series, well-received, but canceled after just 1 season.
Ouch, yeah. This is a tough one. It was supposed to be a 3-season arc, too.
I know, right?
Sadly, it's a perfect example of how sometimes even a good show can fall victim to, the realities of streaming budgets.
The bottom line.
Yeah, those high-budget productions, they can be risky, even if the show is getting critical acclaim.
Yeah, especially if they haven't built up a huge audience yet.
Right.
And then there's this other weird case, Nautilus. This is the Captain Nemo prequel that got caught in, like, the streaming wars crossfire.
Oh, yeah, Nautilus. That was a strange one.
Disney Plus produced it, canceled it before it even aired, and then AMC picked it up. But it's probably not going beyond a single season.
Nautilus is like a cautionary tale, right?
Yeah.
It shows the risks these streamers are taking. Disney Plus probably thought they had a surefire hit with the whole Captain Nemo prequel angle, but then boom, change of plans.
And it makes you think, like, how much control do these shows really have?
Yeah, it's a good question.
It's like they're at the mercy of these giant corporations.
A little bit, yeah.
And speaking of corporate decisions impacting shows, we got to talk about Superman and Lois. This was a highly rated show on the CW, canceled after 4 seasons.
Yeah, that one was a bummer.
I mean, Superman and Lois got hit by, like, this perfect storm of trends. The CW's new ownership, they're shifting gears, moving away from all those expensive scripted shows.
Makes sense business-wise.
Right. And then you've got the whole DC Universe reboot happening over on Max, so, like, there's no room for this Superman in that world anymore.
It's like the network trying to cut costs, and then the franchise itself is going in a totally different direction.
Yeah, rough timing for Superman and Lois. It really highlights how vulnerable these shows are, you know? They're constantly trying to navigate these network whims, streaming platform changes, franchise decisions. Like, is there any stability? Makes you think about the future of streaming originals in general. We're seeing more and more shows getting these shorter runs.
Yeah, 3 or 4 seasons, that seems to be the sweet spot now.
Which is, like, way shorter than what we used to see with network shows.
Oh, yeah. Back in the day, network shows could run for, like, a decade.
Yeah.
They had time to find their audience, to grow. Streaming seems to be all about instant results.
Like, you got to be a hit right out of the gate.
Pretty much.
Take The Umbrella Academy on Netflix.
Okay.
4 seasons. By streaming standards, that's considered a success.
Yeah, definitely.
But I bet some fans were hoping for more.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's like these shows get cut off just as they're hitting their stride.
And it makes you wonder if maybe we as viewers are being conditioned to expect these shorter runs. Have our viewing habits changed that much?
Right, like if we become so used to binge watching whole seasons in one go that we're less patient with those shows that, like, take their time to unfold.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought.
It's a tough question.
Yeah.
I personally love getting lost in those multi-season epics, but I could see the appeal of those limited series too.
Yeah, it's all about finding that balance, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the creators come in. They need to figure out how to tell those really compelling stories within the limits of this new streaming model.
So it's not just about adapting to shorter seasons. It's about, like, telling really great stories within those limitations.
Absolutely.
But what about those shows that get caught in the middle of these big corporate decisions, like we were talking about Superman and Lois?
Yeah, perfect example. Superman and Lois was doing well, but then those franchise decisions came in and boom, collateral damage.
So it's a reminder that at the end of the day, these shows are businesses.
Totally, yeah.
And sometimes creative decisions get made for reasons that have nothing to do with the actual quality of the show.
It's a tough reality.
Like a cosmic pinball machine, these shows are bouncing between, you know, the network, the streaming platform, the franchise. Where does it end? It makes you wonder, like, are we heading towards a world where only those, like, huge established franchises can even survive?
It's a valid question. But don't forget about the power of fandom. We've seen shows like The Expanse get saved by those dedicated fans who rally and fight for their continuation.
Oh, definitely.
Which leads to another question. Should it be on the fans to constantly fight for the shows they love?
Right. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure. It puts the responsibility on the audience, not the platforms.
And it makes you wonder if this constant need to save shows, like, is it actually holding back risk-taking and new ideas?
That's a really interesting point. If creators feel like they have to play it safe, just cater to the existing fandoms.
Yeah.
It could stifle creativity. On the other hand, the passion of fandom, it's incredibly powerful.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, fandom.
Totally. And that's the beauty of this whole landscape, right? It's constantly evolving and we're all part of it.
Okay, so we've talked about how streaming is changing things, shorter seasons becoming the norm. But now I think it's time to, like, zoom back in on that list from canceled Sci-Fi and look at some specific examples that really show these trends in action.
Let's dig a little deeper.
So we're talking about how the streaming landscape is shifting and, like, these shorter seasons, they're becoming the norm. But what does this mean for, specifically, sci-fi and fantasy?
That's a really good question. See, when streaming first took off, it felt like this golden age for genre shows.
Right.
Platforms were taking chances, greenlighting all these unique, ambitious projects.
Yeah. I remember like a couple of years ago, every company was launching their own platform.
Yeah.
It was like a wild west of streaming.
It really was the streaming bubble, they called it.
Yeah.
But that bubble, it's kind of burst,
Yeah.
And now platforms, they're facing a new reality check. They got to make money.
The bottom line.
Yeah. So they're getting a lot more picky about what they spend money on.
And unfortunately, that means like the creative vision sometimes takes a backseat to, cold hard cash.
It's true, and Chaos is a prime example. Stunning visuals, fantastic cast, great premise, but expensive.
Yeah.
And maybe Netflix they didn't see that quick return on their investment.
Which is a shame because Chaos, it felt like it was just getting started. But I guess when it comes to streaming, sometimes good reviews, they just don't cut it.
Sadly not. And it does make you wonder, are these streaming platforms less willing to invest in those shows that, take multiple seasons to really flesh out their world, the characters?
Especially in fantasy. World building is like essential.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about The Dragon Prince, which we talked about earlier. 7 seasons? That's like a unicorn in the streaming world.
Yeah, it really is.
What happens to those shows that, they need more than 3 or 4 seasons to reach their full potential?
That's the concern, right? The old network model, it gave shows time to breathe, to find their audience. But streaming, they seem to want those overnight successes.
It's all about instant gratification.
Pretty much.
Which brings us back to that question about viewer expectations.
Right.
Like, are we part of the problem here?
Maybe a little bit.
I mean, have we gotten so used to just like binging entire seasons in a weekend that we've lost that patience for shows that take their time?
It's a valid question.
I don't know. I mean, I still love those shows, those multi-season epics, but I can also see why those limited series are appealing. You get a complete story in a shorter amount of time.
It's all about finding the balance, I think. And for creators, it's about, being smart. How do you tell those really compelling stories within the constraints of streaming?
So it's not just adapting to shorter seasons.
Right.
It's about telling great stories no matter what those limitations are.
Exactly.
But then you have shows like Superman and Lois, which get caught in the crosshairs of like those big corporate decisions.
Oh, yeah. Superman and Lois is a prime example of how franchise decisions can really impact a show's fate, even if the show's doing well.
Yeah.
If the studio decides to reboot or, shift their focus, things can change in a hurry.
It's a bummer. Like, think about it. The CW, they used to be all about superhero shows, teen dramas.
Yeah, right.
But the new owners, they're like, okay, time to try something different.
Time for a shakeup.
Yeah, and that means cutting costs, especially on those big budget productions like Superman and Lois.
Makes sense from a business perspective.
Yeah, but it's still a bummer for the fans. And it just reinforces that idea that these shows, at the end of the day, they are businesses.
Yeah.
And sometimes creative decisions are driven by things that have nothing to do with the show itself.
Yeah, the business side of things can be brutal.
It's like a cosmic pinball machine.
Yeah.
These shows are bouncing between the network, the streaming platform, the franchise. It's hard to keep up.
It makes you wonder, are we heading toward this world where only, the biggest, most well-established franchises can survive?
That's a good question. But, we can't forget the power of fandom. We've seen it time and again. Shows like The Expanse, they get saved by passionate fans who rally, who fight for their continuation.
Right.
Which, again, brings up another question. Is it fair to put that burden on the fans, to constantly have to fight for the shows they love?
Is it sustainable?
It puts so much pressure on the audience. And it makes you wonder, is this whole, save our show mentality, is it actually holding back new ideas, new risks?
Oh, right. Because if creators feel like they have to constantly cater to the existing fandoms just to keep their show alive, it could definitely stifle that creativity. But at the same time, fandom, it's so powerful. It's really shaped the landscape of sci-fi and fantasy on TV.
So it's complicated.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a double-edged sword, fandom. It can be amazing, but it can also, create these limitations.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of it, right? It's always changing, and we're all part of that evolution.
So we've talked about, streaming, shorter seasons, how it's impacting sci-fi and fantasy. But I think now it's time to go back to that list from canceled sci-fi. Look at some specific examples.
Yeah, let's take a closer look.
All right, let's get back to that list from canceled sci-fi and see what else we can learn from all these canceled and ending shows. We were talking about how those shorter seasons are becoming like the standard now.
Sure.
But there's some really interesting exceptions.
Oh, yeah. The Dragon Prince is a perfect example. Like 7 seasons on Netflix. For an animated show, that's practically unheard of.
That's wild, right? What do you think it is about that show?
Well, it's got that Avatar connection, same creators. That definitely gives it some street cred. But I think the Dragon Prince has also done an amazing job of, like, building its own world, its own characters.
Yeah.
It feels like a show that was, designed to be this long, epic story from the very beginning.
Yeah. And Netflix, to their credit, they seem to have given the creators the freedom to, like, tell that story at their own pace.
Yeah, that's important.
It gives me hope that there's still room for those big, sprawling, multi-season stories in this streaming world. Not everything has to be a quick binge. But speaking of binge-worthy shows, what about Arcane? I mean, huge hit for Netflix, but it was always planned as a limited series.
Arcane is a great example of a show that really knew how to make the most of a limited run.
Yeah.
I mean, they packed so much into those 9 episodes. Incredible animation, complex characters, emotional depth.
It's like a beautifully crafted short story.
Exactly.
It leaves you wanting more, but in a good way, It feels complete.
And it really challenges that idea that, a show's success is measured by how many seasons it gets.
Yeah.
Sometimes a shorter, more focused run can be even more impactful.
Quality over quantity.
Absolutely.
And then you have those shows, kind of like Star Trek, Lower Decks, falls somewhere in between. 5 seasons on Paramount Plus, which is good.
Yeah.
But some fans are still hoping it might get resurrected somewhere else.
Right. And Lower Decks is a good example of a trend we might see more of as these streaming platforms, keep battling it out.
Yeah.
Shows jumping platforms, looking for a better home.
Yeah, like free agency for TV shows.
It really is.
And it gives those canceled shows a chance, a second life.
Yeah.
Which I kind of like.
It's definitely something to watch for. And for us, as viewers, I think it's important to be aware of these shifts because it means, we actually might have more power than we think.
Yeah, like if we're vocal about the shows we love, if we follow them to these new platforms, it sends a message.
Absolutely. It tells these companies that we're invested, that these stories, they matter.
They're worth fighting for.
Exactly. And I think it reinforces this idea that the future of sci-fi and fantasy, it's not set in stone.
Yeah.
It's constantly evolving, and we're all part of that.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, I think, the biggest takeaway is that we're in this really fascinating and sometimes frustrating period for genre television. There are definitely challenges.
Oh, yeah.
But there are also opportunities.
Absolutely.
We've seen shows, become victims of budget cuts, those franchise shakeups, and just the ever-changing world of streaming.
It's tough out there.
It is. But we've also seen shows, they succeed, they defy expectations, they find those new ways to connect with people.
Right, and I think that's what keeps us coming back for more.
And through it all, the one constant has been the fans.
Always.
We're the ones who keep these shows going.
Right.
We're the ones who champion them, who demand more, and that's powerful.
It really is.
But keep watching, keep talking about them, and, keep those conversations going. The world of sci-fi and fantasy, it's vast.
Oh, yeah.
There's so much potential. Who knows what amazing stories are waiting for us?
I can't wait to find out.
And we'll be right here to explore them with you. So until next time, keep those imaginations firing.
This is your need to know. Already dead in my head. Dark sky, no light. Can't tell day from night. I'm lost, can't fight, just drifting out of sight. Heart's hollow, no, can't feel my own defeat. But who cares? Who knows if I fade or if I grow? Trying to fill the empty in my head, but I'm just existential dead. I'm numb to the doom. Every corner's a dark room. I'm existential dead. Thoughts heavy as lead. In the shadows I've been fed on a diet of dread. chasing life with heavy feet. What's the point of trying? We're all born for dying. Minds closed, locked tight, don't fade through the light. If there's meaning here, it's buried in my fear. It's buried in my fear. Trying to fill the empty in my head, but I'm just existential dead. I'm numb to the doom, gloom. Every corner's a dark room. Oh, I'm existential dead. Thoughts heavy as lead. In the shadows I've been fed, on a diet of dread. Voices say breathe, you'll be fine, but all I see's the end of the line. Dancing close to the edge of it all. I'm a ghost in a free fall. Yeah, I'm numb to the doom, gloom. Every corner's a dark room. Oh, I'm existential dead. Thoughts heavy as lead. In the shadows I've been fed, on a diet of dread. Already dead in my head. Open point, tracing life with heavy feet. What's the point of trying? We're all born for dying. But what's the point of trying? What's the point of trying? Living thoughts on a repeat. Fine. What's the point of trying? What's the point of trying? We're all born for dying. Voices say breathe, you'll be fine, but all I see's the end of the line. Dancing close to the edge of it all. I'm a ghost in a free fall. Yeah, numb to the doom, gloom. Every corner's a dark room. Oh, I'm existential dead. Thoughts heavy as lead. In the shadows I've been fed, on a diet of dread. Already dead in my head.